The collision alarm screaming inside the cockpit of the salvage hauler Iron Mule was not the standard red pulse of a mechanical failure. It was a violent, strobe light violet that indicated a total override of the navigation core. Elias Thorne slammed his hand against the manual release for the thruster coupling. The lever did not budge. The ship shuddered, groaning like a dying beast as it hit the upper atmosphere of the moon designated orbitally as A7X, known in the darker corners of the star charts as the necropolis. System failure. The flight computer droned in a synthetic, calm voice. Trajectory locked. Impact in 40 seconds. Elias gritted his teeth, his knuckles turning white as he fought the yoke. He was 32 years old, a veteran of the debris belts, and he knew the difference between a glitch and a death sentence. This was no accident. Someone had uploaded a parasite code into his nav drive during his last refueling stop at Titan Station. The code had waited until he was scanning the perimeter of the forbidden sector to wake up and hurl him straight down. Gravity seized him by the chest. The viewport became a blur of storm-gray clouds and jagged, towering structures that pierced the smog. He was not crashing into a wasteland. He was crashing into a city that looked like a motherboard grown from bone and obsidian. "Come on," Elias growled at the controls. "Give me 5%. Just give me 5% thrust." The Iron Mule screamed as the heat shielding tore away. The ground rushed up, a mosaic of dark spires and glowing red aqueducts. He saw a massive, cathedral-like structure directly ahead, its roof an open maw of black glass. "Brace," the computer whispered. The impact was not a singular event. It was a series of violent, bone-jarring crunches. Metal shrieked as the hull sheared through 3 layers of ancient architectural plating. The cockpit glass blew inward in a shower of diamond dust. Elias felt a sharp, icy sting in his neck, followed instantly by a crushing darkness that swallowed the world whole. Consciousness returned to Elias in waves of throbbing pain. The first thing he registered was the smell. It was not the acrid scent of burning fuel or melting plastic he expected from a wreck. The air smelled of ozone, wet iron, and orchids. He coughed, his lungs burning. He pushed a piece of twisted bulkhead off his legs and dragged himself out of the shattered remains of the cockpit. He tumbled onto a cold, polished floor. He tried to stand, but his legs were water. He looked up. He was inside a cavernous hall that defied engineering logic. The ceiling vaulted hundreds of feet high, supported by ribs of dark, translucent material that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic bioluminescence. It looked less like a building and more like the inside of a colossal living lung. Pipes made of some organic polymer ran along the walls, carrying fluids that glowed a deep, rich crimson. The hum of the place was physical. It vibrated in his teeth. Elias checked his flight suit. The biomonitor on his wrist was flashing a frantic orange sequence. His heart rate was erratic. He reached up to touch the stinging spot on his neck and pulled his hand away. His fingers were coated in a black, oily substance. The wreckage of his ship lay behind him, a smoking crater of metal amidst the pristine elegance of the alien cathedral. Then he heard the footsteps. They were silent, rhythmic, and terrifyingly fast. Elias fumbled for the kinetic pistol holstered at his hip, but his fingers were numb. He managed to unclip it just as the shadows detached themselves from the high pillars. 5 figures encircled him. They were tall, humanoid, but clearly divergent from the baseline human genome. Their skin was the color of moonlight on snow, flawless and pale. They wore armor that looked like solidified smoke, articulated to allow for fluid, predatory movement. Their eyes were solid pools of color, gold, violet, crimson with no whites. "Lower the weapon, salvage pilot," one of them said. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, amplified by the acoustics of the hall. Elias tried to raise the gun, but his arm refused to obey. He slumped against the cool stone of a pillar. "Who are you?" Elias wheezed. "We are the stewards of the blood," the figure said, stepping into the light. The being was male, terrifyingly beautiful, with a face that looked like it had been carved from marble. "You have breached the sanctity of the royal gene vault. The penalty is liquidation." The figure raised a hand. The fingers ended in retractable, needle-sharp talons that glistened with a clear fluid. "Wait," a voice cut through the air. It was a woman's voice, low, smoky, and laced with an authority that made the hairs on Elias's arms stand up. The 5 guards froze instantly. They dropped to one knee in a synchronized motion that was too perfect to be natural. From the far end of the hall, a woman approached. She did not walk. She seemed to glide, the hem of her long midnight blue gown trailing over the floor like liquid shadow. She was taller than Elias, her presence occupying the entire massive space. Her skin was a pale violet hue, and her hair was a cascade of silver that seemed to move on its own, reacting to the air currents. This was the queen. There was no doubt. The air around her grew colder, sharper. She stopped 3 feet from Elias. Her eyes were a striking, luminescent teal, framed by lashes that looked like frost. She looked down at him not with anger, but with a clinical, almost amused curiosity. "A salvage pilot in a Class 4 hauler," she said. Her accent was refined, clipping the consonants with precision. "You possess remarkable incompetence to crash a rusted bucket into the roof of my personal solarium." Elias coughed again. "Tasting copper. I had help. Sabotage." The queen tilted her head. "Sabotage. How very dramatic." She knelt, ignoring the gasp of protest from the head guard. She reached out and touched Elias's chin, tilting his head to the side. Her fingers were cool, her skin smooth as glass. She inspected the wound on his neck where the black oil was seeping into his collar. Her expression shifted from amusement to sharp calculation. "This is not crash debris," she murmured. She ran a thumb near the wound, and Elias flinched. "This is a neurotoxin delivery system, a micro-dart." She looked at the black substance on her thumb, then brought it to her nose. She inhaled slightly and her eyes widened. "Valyrian nightshade," she whispered. "Synthesized, potent enough to kill a kraken, let alone a human male of average build." She looked back at Elias. "You have approximately 3 minutes of life remaining. Pilot, your heart is already beginning to liquefy." Elias tried to laugh, but it came out as a rattle. "Well, that is bad news for my retirement plan." The queen stared at him. The corner of her mouth twitched, a sense of humor in the face of necrosis. "I appreciate that." "My queen," the head guard said, rising. "We must dispose of the body before the toxin contaminates the floor." "No," the queen said. She did not look away from Elias. The sabotage was not just to kill him, she said, her mind racing aloud. It was time to crash him here. Someone wanted a dead human in my sanctuary, a diplomatic corpse to incite an investigation, a pretext for the Senate to breach our borders. She looked deep into Elias's eyes. He felt his vision tunneling. The gray clouds were closing in. "If you die, they win," she told him. "And I do not like losing." She stood up abruptly, her gown swirling around her. "Prepare the solar stasis chamber." "My queen," the guard shouted, stepping forward. "The law of the first accord is absolute. You cannot introduce base human biology to the royal strain. It is heresy. It is war. It is necessary," she snapped. The sound of her voice cracked like a whip, echoing off the high ceiling. "Standard antidotes are useless against synthesized nightshade." His only chance is metabolic overwriting. She looked down at Elias, who was now sliding sideways, the floor feeling like it was tilting. She knelt again, closer this time. He could smell her scent, cold rain and ozone. "Listen to me, pilot," she said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "This is going to hurt more than the crash, but it will buy you time." "Time for what?" Elias mumbled. "Time to explain why someone wants us both destroyed," she said. She leaned in. Elias felt her breath on his neck, right over the pulse point. He wanted to push her away, but his body was paralyzed. He felt the sharp prick of her fangs, not the savage tear of a monster, but the surgical precision of a medical instrument. Then came the fire. It was not blood she was taking. It was something she was giving. He felt a rush of liquid heat enter his veins, burning through the ice of the toxin. It felt like she had injected him with liquid sunlight. He arched his back, a silent scream trapped in his throat. The burning raced through his arteries, hunting down the poison, consuming it, and rewriting the code of his cells. She pulled back, wiping a speck of crimson from her lip. Her teal eyes were glowing brighter now, pulsing in time with the frantic rhythm of his own heart. She saved his life with her bite. Now every clan will want him dead. Elias fell back against the floor, the world dissolving into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. The last thing he heard was the Queen's voice, commanding and terrified. "Seal the room. Let no one in." The second awakening was different. There was no pain, only a vibrating hum that seemed to come from his own marrow. Elias opened his eyes. He was lying on a floating platform in a room made of white marble and glass. Outside, a massive panoramic window. The dark city stretched to the horizon, lit by the eerie glow of neon red fog. He sat up. He moved too fast. His body felt light, coiled, explosive. He looked at his hands. They looked the same, calloused, scarred from years of wrench turning, but the veins beneath the skin were darker, more prominent. He took a breath, and he could smell everything. He could smell the dust on the chaotic shelves across the room. He could smell the synthetic lubricant of the door hinges. He could hear the heartbeat of someone standing 20 feet away. He turned his head. The Queen was standing by a holographic console, her back to him. She was wearing a different gown now, something armored and severe in dark silver. "You are awake," she said. She did not turn around. 7 hours. The regenerative strain integrated faster than I calculated. Elias swung his legs off the platform. He felt a strange thrumming in his chest, a sensation that pulled him toward her. It was like a magnetic field. When he looked at her, he felt a spike of anxiety that was not his own. "What did you do to me?" Elias asked. His voice sounded deeper, resonant. "I saved you," she said, finally turning to face him. "And I ruined you." She walked toward him, keeping a careful distance. "The guards are outside. The entire Council of Clans has convened in the Grand Spire. They are demanding your head." Elias rubbed his neck. The wound was gone. Not even a scar remained. "My head?" Elias asked. "I am just a salvage pilot. I tow junk. I do not do politics." "You are no longer just a pilot," the Queen said. She stopped 10 feet away. The pull in his chest intensified. "When I gave you the royal strain, I did not just neutralize the poison. I bonded your biology to mine. The bite is a biological interface. It was designed thousands of years ago for other purposes." She looked away, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face before she masked it with steel. "The clans believe you now carry a genetic crown key," she explained, "a biological signature that could allow you to access the ancient weapon vaults and the succession protocols. They think you are a usurper I created to bypass their authority. Elias blinked. He looked at his hands again. Crown key? Lady, I can barely hotwire a maglev bike. The doors to the chamber hissed open. A group of 6 individuals stormed in. They were dressed in opulent robes of velvet and wire mesh. Their faces were varying shades of pale, their eyes burning with hostility. Queen Valara, one of them shouted. He was an older male with silver hair that floated in a halo around his head. This is madness. You harbor the abomination here? In the royal suite? High Counselor Vane, the queen said, her voice dropping to a dangerous chill. You will lower your voice in my presence. The abomination is awake, Vane spat, pointing a long, gloved finger at Elias. Look at him. He radiates the signature. It is a desecration of the blood law. He must be incinerated immediately. Elias looked at the group of angry, immortal aristocrats. He looked at the queen, who was visibly tensing, her hand hovering near a concealed weapon at her hip. He felt her fear. He literally felt it, cold and sharp in his own gut. He stood up. He felt unsteady, but he forced himself to look casual. He dusted off his flight suit, which someone had cleaned and mended while he slept. Excuse me, Elias said loudly. The room went silent. The counselors looked at him as if a piece of furniture had started speaking. If we are talking about incineration, Elias said, leaning against the floating medical bed, I need to check my liability clauses. My standard rate for salvage is 500 credits an hour. But for hazardous biological experimentation and political crisis management, I usually charge triple. He looked at Vane. Plus expenses. Do you have a per diem policy? Vane's jaw dropped. The sheer audacity of the mundane question seemed to short-circuit his rage for a second. He dares to mock us? Vane hissed. He is delirious. The queen lied smoothly. She stepped between Elias and the council. The human mind is fragile. It cannot comprehend the gravity of his situation. He seems lucid enough to demand payment. Another counselor muttered. He is under my protection, the queen announced. Her voice rang with absolute finality. I invoke the right of sanctuary. He is a witness to the sabotage that targeted the throne. Until the investigation into the crash is complete, any harm that comes to him is an act of treason against me. Vane narrowed his eyes. Sanctuary has limits. Valara, you are playing a dangerous game. The Senate will hear of this. If he is indeed a key, he belongs to the state, not to you. The council turned and swept out of the room, their robes hissing against the floor. As the door sealed, the queen let out a breath she had been holding. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Elias felt a wave of exhaustion hit him, hers, not his. You are terrible at negotiating, the queen said, turning to him. Triple rate? You should have asked for a planet. Elias grinned, though his hands were shaking. I figure I will start small. So, are we going to talk about the fact that I can feel you getting a migraine? It is the resonance, she said, rubbing her temples, a side effect of the bond. It will fade, or it will drive us both mad. She walked to the window, looking out at the red fog of the city. I am sorry, pilot, she said softly. I had to choose between your death and your imprisonment. I chose the one that kept you breathing. Elias walked up beside her. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He looked different, sharper, dangerous. My name is Elias, he said. Valara, she replied. Well, Valara, Elias said. It looks like I am stuck here. So who is the guy with the floating hair? Vane, she said. My uncle. And the man who most likely sabotaged your ship. Suddenly, the glass in front of them shattered. Elias moved before he thought. His reflexes were faster than light. He tackled the queen, slamming her to the marble floor just as a high-velocity projectile punched through the space where her head had been a microsecond before. The crack of the sonic boom echoed in the room. Elias lay on top of her, breathing hard. He could feel her heartbeat hammering against his chest. It was synchronized perfectly with his own. They were not safe. The title of protected guest meant nothing. "We need to move," Elias said, staring at the hole in the wall behind them. "Now." Valara looked up at him, her eyes wide with the realization that the war had already started. "Agreed," she whispered. She saved his life with her bite. But as the second shot disintegrated the medical bed, Elias knew the truth. She had saved him for a hunt, and they were the prey. The evacuation shuttle, a sleek vessel named the Silver Dart, cut through the upper atmosphere of the moon like a needle through black silk. Inside the pressurized cabin, the air was thick with tension and the smell of ozone from the discharged weapons back at the palace. Elias Thorne sat strapped into a crash seat that was upholstered in material softer than any bed he had ever owned. He watched the sprawling city of the necropolis shrink below them, transforming from a neon-lit labyrinth into a glowing circuit board. "We are clear of the intercept zone," the pilot announced over the intercom. "Trajectory set for the orbital spire, estimated arrival in 45 minutes. Valara sat opposite Elias. She had not spoken since they sprinted down the private hangar bay corridor, flanked by her personal Praetorian guard. She was staring at a data pad, her fingers moving across the surface with a speed that blurred in Elias's vision. "So," Elias said, testing his voice. It sounded steady, despite the fact that his heart was hammering a rhythm he did not recognize. "Is this a standard Tuesday for royalty, or am I special?" Valara did not look up. "Standard Tuesdays involve trade disputes and tax audits," she said. "Being shot at by high-velocity railguns inside my own medical wing is a novelty." She finally lowered the pad and looked at him. Her teal eyes were intense, searching his face. "How do you feel?" she asked. Elias flexed his hands. He felt energized, vibrating with a surplus of power that made his skin itch. "I feel like I drank 10 pots of coffee and then plugged myself into a fusion generator," he admitted. "And I can hear the pilot's pulse. It is skipping. He is nervous." Valara nodded slowly. "That is the bond. It heightens your sensory input. The pilot is nervous because he is carrying the most valuable target in the sector." She unbuckled her harness and stood up as the shuttle reached the smooth glide of zero gravity. She floated slightly, grabbing a handhold with effortless grace. "You need to understand what has happened to you." "Elias," she said, "you think you have been turned into a monster of myth. You have not." She tapped a panel on the wall, and a holographic display shimmered into existence between them. It showed a double helix, but it was not DNA. It was complex, metallic, and wove together with organic strands. "The galaxy calls us vampires because it is an easy word for what they fear," Valara explained, gesturing to the hologram. "But we are not supernatural. We are post-human. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors, the progenitors, colonized this sector. They found the native environment toxic. Instead of terraforming the moons, they terraformed themselves." She swiped the hologram, and it zoomed in on the blood cells. They developed a symbiotic biotechnology. She continued. "The blood is a living fluid, a nanotech medium that repairs cellular decay, enhances strength, and allows for direct neural interfacing with our technology. We drink the synthetic fluid to maintain the symbiosis. It is not magic. It is engineering." Elias stared at the spinning diagram. "So I am a cyborg." "No," Valara said. "You are a hybrid. When I bit you, I did not just give you the fluid. I gave you the royal strain. It is the master key to the entire network. She looked at him with a gravity that made the room feel smaller. Most of our technology, including the gene vaults that store the history and weapons of the clans, is bio-locked. It responds only to specific genetic signatures. My signature, and now mine. Elias realized. Exactly, she said. That is why the clans are in a panic. They operate on a strict hierarchy. If a random human salvage pilot can open the vaults, the entire political structure collapses. You are a glitch in their system, a glitch that can access the nuke codes. Elias let out a low whistle. No wonder Uncle Vane looked like he swallowed a lemon. It is worse than Vane, Valara said, turning back to the window where the orbital spire was coming into view. It was a massive space station shaped like a silver needle, rotating slowly against the backdrop of the stars. My intelligence network reports that 3 rival clans have already petitioned the Interstellar Senate, she said. They are claiming I have weaponized a human. They want the Senate to declare the bond illegal and issue a warrant for your liquidation. Elias looked at the station. Great. I go from crashing a truck to being a galactic fugitive in less than 24 hours. We are going to the spire to regroup, Valara said. It is neutral ground, technically. We have a diplomatic suite there. I need to teach you how to control this before you accidentally crush a door handle or read the mind of a diplomat. The training began 2 hours after they docked. The diplomatic suite was a fortress of luxury, with walls of white marble and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the curvature of the moon below. Valara had cleared the main lounge of furniture. She stood in the center, holding a small silver sphere. Catch, she said. She flicked her wrist. The sphere shot toward Elias's head faster than a bullet. Elias did not think. His hand moved on its own. He snatched the sphere out of the air inches from his nose. The impact stung his palm, but he held it. Good, Valara said. Now throw it back, gently. Elias tossed it, or he intended to toss it. The sphere left his hand like a cannonball, slamming into the far wall with enough force to crack the marble plaster. Valara raised an eyebrow. I said gently. I barely touched it, Elias protested. Your muscles are operating at 400% efficiency, she said, walking over to inspect the dent in the wall. You have no concept of your new baseline. You are like a toddler driving a tank. She spent the next 3 hours running him through physical drills. Balance. Grip strength. Focus. It was exhausting, not physically but mentally. He had to constantly hold himself back. But the physical training was the easy part. The hard part was the noise. Whenever he got too close to Valara, the hum in his head grew louder. He could feel her frustration when he failed a drill. He could feel her worry, a cold current running underneath her calm exterior. Stop it, she said suddenly, turning away from him. Stop what? Elias asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Stop projecting, she said sharply. Your emotions are leaking. I can feel your anxiety. It is distracting. My anxiety? Elias laughed, a short, sharp bark. Lady, I am picking up enough guilt from you to power a city block. You feel bad about dragging me into this. You feel guilty about the crash. Valara froze. She turned slowly to face him. Stay out of my head. Pilot, she warned. I am not trying to be in it, Elias shouted. It is like a radio I cannot turn off. I can feel your heartbeat right now. It is fast. You are scared. Not for yourself. For me. Valara closed the distance between them in a blur of motion. She stopped inches from him, looking up into his face. The air between them crackled with static. I am not scared, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I am calculating risks. Elias looked down at her. He could see the gold flecks in her teal eyes. He could smell the scent of rain and iron that was uniquely hers. The pull was magnetic, terrifying. He wanted to lean in. He wanted to run away. Then calculate this, Elias said, his voice dropping. If we are going to survive this, you need to stop treating me like a piece of equipment you accidentally broke. I am a person. Valara stared at him for a long moment. The tension was thick, heavy, and undeniably intimate. For a second, the queen vanished, and there was just a woman standing in front of a man, both of them overwhelmed by a connection they did not ask for. She took a step back, breaking the field. You are right, she said, smoothing her dress. We need structure. She walked over to a desk and picked up a data pad. That evening, Elias sat at the long obsidian dining table, tapping a stylus against the glass surface. Valara sat at the head of the table, reviewing security reports. I have a proposal, Elias said. Valara did not look up. If it involves triple pay again, the answer is no. It is a survival contract, Elias said, sliding the data pad across the long table. It stopped perfectly at her fingertips. Valara picked it up. She read the first few lines and a small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Clause 1. She read aloud. The queen shall not hiss, growl, or look at the human like he is a snack. It is a valid concern, Elias said, taking a sip of synthetic wine. Clause 4, she continued. No biting without written consent in triplicate. She looked up at him, amusement dancing in her eyes. You think you are funny? I think humor is a coping mechanism, Elias replied. Keep reading. Clause 9 is the deal breaker. Valara scrolled down. Clause 9. The human gets access to real coffee, not this protein sludge, and he reserves the right to say I told you so once per day if a plan goes sideways. She laughed. It was a clear, melodic sound that seemed to surprise even her. She set the pad down. You are an absurdist. Elias Thorne. I am a realist. Valara, he corrected. This contract, it is my way of saying I am in. I am not a hostage. I am a partner. Even if I am a junior partner who crashes trucks. Valara looked at him, and the amusement faded into something softer, something like respect. Agreed, she said. I will have the kitchen synthesize real coffee beans, but I retain veto power on the I told you so clause. Deal, Elias said. The doors to the dining hall opened, and a tall, slender man walked in. He was dressed in the high-collared gray robes of the administrative caste. He had a face that was handsome in a generic, trustworthy way, with a smile that practiced diplomacy. Chancellor Aurelius, Valara said, her demeanor instantly shifting back to regal armor. You are late. My apologies. Your Majesty, Aurelius said, bowing deeply. He glanced at Elias with a polite, if slightly condescending, nod. And to you, Master Thorne, the security protocols on the station are rigorous. What do you have? Valara asked. Aurelius tapped his own datapad, projecting a display into the air above the table. It showed a detailed schematic of the Iron Mule, Elias's destroyed ship. We have analyzed the flight logs from the wreckage, Aurelius said. The sabotage was sophisticated, a wormhole virus planted in the navigation drive. It masked itself as a routine update. Who planted it? Elias asked. Aurelius hesitated. That is the troubling part. The encryption key used to upload the virus belongs to a royal security clearance. Specifically, it matches the signature of the inner circle. Valara went still, her hands clenched on the table. You are saying one of my personal advisors tried to assassinate me? she asked. Or tried to frame you for the death of a human, Aurelius corrected gently. The Senate is already buzzing with the rumor that you lured Master Thorn here to experiment on him. If they can prove the sabotage came from your own codes, they will have their pretext for war. Valara stood up and walked to the window. Her reflection was ghostly in the glass. Who has access to those codes besides me? She asked. Myself, Aurelius said. Your Uncle Vane, and General Kale. Kale is loyal, Valara said immediately, and you are here helping me. That leaves Vane, Elias said, the guy who wanted to incinerate me. It seems the most likely conclusion, Aurelius agreed. But we need proof. Vane is powerful. He controls the mining guilds. If we accuse him without absolute evidence, we start a civil war. Valara turned back to the room. Her face was hard. There is a diplomatic summit tomorrow morning here on the spire, she said. The Senate envoy, Ambassador Crix, will be there to hear the clan's grievances. I know, Aurelius said. It will be a hostile environment. I am going, Valara said, and I am taking Elias. Aurelius's eyes widened slightly. Your Majesty, is that wise? He is a lightning rod. The network is already calling him the human consort and the blood thief. Parading him in front of the clans is a provocation. I am not parading him, Valara said. I am showing them that I have nothing to hide. If Vane is behind this, he will try to make a move at the summit. He will try to provoke Elias into losing control. She looked at Elias. Can you handle it? Can you control the bond? Elias stood up. He felt the hum of her anxiety, but he pushed back with a wave of calm. I will read the contract, he said. Clause 5. The human plays nice with the scary politicians. The grand hall of the orbital spire was a testament to galactic excess. The floor was made of transparent aluminum, revealing the starry void beneath their feet. Delegates from the 12 major clans filled the room, a sea of velvet, armor, and jewels. When Valara entered, the room went silent. Elias walked a step behind her, dressed in a formal suit of dark gray that Aurelius had provided. It was armored beneath the fabric. He could feel the eyes on him, hundreds of them. He could hear the whispers. Look at him. He walks like a predator. Abomination. Does she share her bed with it? Elias kept his face neutral, but his senses were screaming. He could smell the pheromones of aggression in the air. He could hear the rapid heartbeats of the guards lining the walls. Valara walked to the center of the room, where a circular podium awaited. Ambassador Crix, a squat, multi-eyed being from the Senate, hovered on a gravity disk. Queen Valara, Crix burbled, his voice translated by a mechanical collar. You have brought the subject. I have brought my guest, Valara corrected, her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. Guest, a voice sneered. Vane stepped out from the crowd. He was wearing crimson robes that looked like fresh blood. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Since when do we grant guests access to the royal gene vault? Vane asked, turning to the crowd. Since when do we let an alien species carry the key to our destruction? I have not accessed anything, Elias said calmly. Vane ignored him. This human is a weapon, Vane shouted, and Valara is pointing him at us, the crowd murmured, the sound rising like a tide. This is a misunderstanding, Aurelius said, stepping forward from the side. He stood between Valara and Vane, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. The queen acted to save a life. There is no conspiracy. Vane laughed. No conspiracy? Then why did I find this? Vane pulled a data crystal from his robe and threw it onto the floor. A hologram sprang up. It was a recording, audio only. It was Valara's voice. Bring the human down. Make it look like an accident. I need a test subject. The room erupted. That is a fabrication, Valara shouted, her composure cracking. I never said that. It is her voice signature. Someone shouted. Elias felt a spike of cold dread. He looked at Valara. She was genuinely shocked. This was not a bluff. She had been framed perfectly. He looked at Aurelius. The Chancellor was looking at the ground, a look of profound sadness on his face. I am sorry. Valara, Aurelius said softly. The evidence, it was overwhelming. I had to give it to them. Valara stared at him. You gave him the recording? Elias realized. You are the inside man. Aurelius looked up, and for a split second the mask slipped. His eyes were cold, calculating. For the good of the realm. Your Majesty, Aurelius said, you are unfit to rule. Seize them, Vane roared. The guards along the wall raised their weapons. They were not aiming at Elias. They were aiming at Valara. Run, Elias yelled. He did not think. He grabbed Valara's arm and yanked her sideways just as the air where she had been standing was filled with plasma bolts. The room descended into chaos. Delegates screamed and scrambled for cover. Elias dragged Valara behind a heavy pillar. Stone chips rained down on them. We are cut off, Valara shouted, pulling a collapsible energy pistol from her gown. The main exit is blocked. The service vents, Elias said, pointing to a grate on the far wall. It is a salvage pilot trick. There is always a vent. They broke from cover. Elias moved with a speed that surprised even him. He saw the world in slow motion. A guard raised a rifle. Elias kicked a heavy ceremonial table, sending it sliding across the floor to crush the guard's legs. He reached the vent, ripped the grate off its hinges with one hand, and shoved Valara inside. He dived in after her just as a plasma grenade detonated in the hall behind them. The shockwave slammed them forward into the darkness. They tumbled down a steep, slick chute, sliding for what felt like miles. They hit the bottom with a splash, landing in knee-deep water that smelled of rust and recycled chemicals. They were in the Undercity, the bowels of the station where the machinery lived. Valara stood up, her expensive gown ruined, her hair wild. She looked at Elias. She was breathing hard, her eyes wide with the adrenaline of the fall. Aurelius, she hissed. It was Aurelius the whole time. He played us, Elias said, wiping sludge from his face. He played everyone. Valara looked around at the dark, dripping tunnels. We are miles from the docks. We are hunted. And we have nowhere to go. Elias checked his pockets. He still had the data pad with the contract. He tapped it, bringing up the faint glow of the screen. Clause 10, Elias said, a grim smile touching his lips. When the fancy palace kicks us out, we improvise. He offered her a hand. Come on. Your Majesty, welcome to my world. Valara looked at his hand, then at his face. She took it. Her grip was iron strong. Led the way, partner, she said. The undercity of the orbital spire did not sleep, largely because it was screaming. Elias Thorne pulled the collar of his stolen heavy canvas jacket up around his neck to hide the faint, pulsating glow of his veins. Beside him, Queen Valara moved with a stiffness that had nothing to do with injury and everything to do with disgust. She wore a mechanic's jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too big. The sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that looked too delicate for the grease stains Elias had artfully applied to them. Keep your head down, Elias murmured, guiding her through the crush of bodies in the market district known as the Sump. I am a sovereign ruler, Valara whispered back, her voice tight. I do not skulk. You do when there is a 50 million credit bounty on your head, Elias replied. And that is just the price for me. I imagine you are worth at least double. The sump was a sensory assault. Neon signs in jarring pinks and acidic greens flickered overhead, advertising everything from synthetic liver replacements to unlicensed memory wipes. The air tasted of recycled air, fried protein, and the copper tang of blood tech. Here, in the shadow of the aristocracy, the blood economy was not a ritual. It was a drug trade. Elias saw a vendor on a corner selling vials of glowing red liquid to a shaking addict. The addict downed the vial and immediately stood straighter, his eyes rolling back in ecstasy as the low-grade regenerative nanites flooded his system. Barbarians, Valara hissed, looking away. They dilute the sacred fluid with stimulants and sell it as a high. It is supply and demand, Elias said, steering her toward a dimly lit cantina that looked like it had been carved out of the hull of a crashed freighter. And right now, we are in high demand. They entered the cantina. The music was a wall of bass that vibrated in Elias's chest. The patrons were a mix of off-world mercenaries, disgraced clan exiles, and cybernetic laborers. "We are looking for a booth in the back," Elias said. "Look for a guy who looks like a calamari crossed with a toaster." Valara frowned. "I do not understand your metaphors. You will know him when you see him." They navigated the crowded room. Elias felt the bond between them thrumming like a radar. He could feel Valara's anxiety spiking every time someone looked at her too long. He sent a wave of calm back down the link, an instinctive reassurance that surprised him with its ease. "There," Elias said. In the darkest corner booth sat a figure shrouded in holographic smoke. As they approached, the smoke cleared to reveal a Tellarite smuggler named Dax. Dax had blue skin, 4 eyes, and a robotic arm that was currently disassembling a blaster pistol with terrifying speed. "Elias," Dax said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "I heard you were dead. I was about to pour a drink out for you." "Cheap stuff, obviously." "Dax," Elias said, sliding into the booth. "This is my associate, Val." Dax's 4 eyes swiveled to Valara. He paused. Then he let out a low, whistling laugh. "Val," he repeated, "right. And I am the Emperor of the Core Worlds. Your Majesty, you might want to wipe the grease off your cheek. It does not match the bone structure." Valara stiffened, but Elias put a hand on her arm. "We need intel." "Dax," Elias said, leaning in. "We are flying blind." Dax reassembled the pistol in 2 seconds and set it on the table. "You are not flying blind, Elias. You are flying into a sun. The whole net is lit up. The Council of Clans has declared open season. But that is not the interesting part." "What is the interesting part?" Valara asked, her voice dropping to that dangerous register that commanded silence. Dax leaned forward. "The interesting part is the money trail. I track credit flows. It is a hobby. Usually, when a coup happens, the money moves from one clan to another. Internal circulation. But this time, the money funding the mercenaries hunting you is not coming from the clans." "Where is it coming from?" Elias asked. "Off-world," Dax said. "Deep space accounts. Shell corporations owned by the Interstellar Mining Consortium?" Valara's eyes widened. "That is impossible. The consortium is bound by the Non-Interference Treaty. They cannot fund political upheaval in the vampire sector." Dax shrugged. Someone forgot to tell them that. Or maybe someone on the inside invited them in. "Aurelius," Valara whispered. The realization seemed to physically strike her. "He is not just trying to take the throne. He is selling the sector. He is going to privatize the gene vaults." Dax tapped the table. "Bingo. You are not fighting a civil war, Your Majesty. You are fighting a corporate hostile takeover. And right now, You are the only thing standing in the way of the Blood Clans becoming a subsidiary of a mining company. We need proof, Elias said. Hard proof. Then you need the archives, Dax said. But the main data spire is locked down tighter than a black hole. Not the main spire, Valara said, her mind racing. The old archive. The orbital sanctuary where the first blood accord was signed. It is offline. Air-gapped. If there is a record of the original treaty mandates regarding foreign interference, it will be there. Dax whistled again. The Necropolis orbit? That place is a ghost ship. Automated defenses from the War of Ash. You will be shredded before you dock. We have a pilot, Valara said, looking at Elias. And I have a ship, Dax said, grinning to reveal a row of metal teeth. For a price? Triple rate? Elias guessed. Dax winked. Quadruple. Hazard pay is a killer these days. The safe house Dax provided was a cramped storage container suspended by magnetic chains over a bottomless ventilation shaft. It swayed gently in the station's artificial gravity currents. It was not a palace, but it was quiet. Elias sat on a crate, watching Valara pace. She had scrubbed the grease from her face, but the tension remained. She looked small in the oversized jumpsuit, stripped of her armor and her court. Stop pacing, Elias said gently. You are making the container swing. Valara stopped. She leaned against the metal wall, wrapping her arms around herself. I built a cage, she said softly. What? My empire, she said. I built a cage and called it order. She looked at Elias, her teal eyes dark with memory. You asked about my family and how I survived. I was 16. There was a banquet. The Crimson Clan. They poisoned the wine, not with toxins, but with a blood frenzy agent. I watched my father tear my mother apart. I watched my brothers turn on each other. Elias went still. He did not speak. I survived because I hid in a ventilation duct. Valara continued. I listened to them die for 6 hours. When I came out, I was the only one left with royal blood. I swore I would never let that chaos happen again. So I wrote the Iron Laws. I segregated the clans. I executed dissenters. I created a world where order was the only god. She looked down at her hands. And now I see what I created. A hierarchy so rigid that it shattered the moment a variable was introduced. You. Elias stood up and walked over to her. The container swayed. You did what you had to do to survive, Elias said. Did I? She asked, looking up at him. Or did I just hide in a bigger ventilation duct? She took a step closer to him. The magnetic pull of the bond flared, hot and sudden. When I bit you, Elias, it was not just about the antidote. The medical drone had a 20% chance of success. I could have risked it. Why didn't you? Elias asked. Because I was tired of being the only one in the room, she whispered. The confession hung in the air between them. It was heavier than the threat of death outside. She had bonded him to her not just to save his life, but to end her own isolation. Elias felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly washed away by a wave of profound sadness coming from her. He looked at this woman, this alien queen who could crush steel with her hands, and saw the terrified 16-year-old girl hiding in the dark. But he could not let that be the foundation of whatever this was. You do not get to use me as a cure for loneliness. Valara, Elias said. His voice was firm, drawing a line in the sand. Valara flinched, stepping back. I know. I am sorry. I am not a pet, Elias continued. And I am not a trophy. If we are going to do this, if we are going to save your empire, we do it as equals. You do not own me. This bond, it goes both ways. I feel what you feel, but my choices are my own. He reached out and took her hand. It was a risk. He felt the jolt of electricity, the sudden rush of her heartbeat syncing with his. "I am choosing to help you," Elias said. "Not because of the bite, but because I like the woman who cracked a joke while I was dying." Valara looked at their joined hands. She took a deep, trembling breath. "Equals," she agreed. She squeezed his hand, and for the first time, the bond didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a lifeline. "Now," she said, her voice strengthening, regaining the steel of the queen. "Let us go break into a library." The Rust Bucket, Dax's appropriately named corvette, drifted silently toward the coordinates of the old archive. The archive was a massive wheel-shaped station orbiting in the debris field of a shattered moon. It was dark, silent, and covered in the dust of 3 centuries. "We are coming up on the docking ring," Dax announced from the cockpit. "I am reading active defense turrets. They are tracking us." "Fly casual," Elias said, leaning over the pilot's shoulder. "I am flying casual," Dax snapped. "The turrets are the ones being aggressive." Valara stood by the airlock, checking the charge on a plasma cutter. "We have to be fast. The moment we dock, the station will wake up." Dax spiraled the ship through a gap in the debris field, dodging a spinning chunk of rock the size of a city block. He slammed the docking clamps onto the archive's hull with a metallic screech. "We are latched," Dax shouted. "Sunk go. I will keep the engines running hot." Elias and Valara cycled the airlock and stepped into the archive. The interior was frozen in time. The air was thin and frigid. Floating dust motes caught the beams of their flashlights. The architecture here was different from the necropolis. Older, more organic. The walls seemed to be grown from bone-white coral. They ran down the main corridor, their footsteps echoing in the silence. "The central vault is this way," Valara said, consulting a wrist comp. They reached a massive circular door. It was intricate, covered in shifting geometric patterns that glowed with a faint, dying light. There was a console in the center with a needle-like interface. "This is it," Valara said, "the vault of the first accord." She stepped up to the console. She placed her hand on the interface. A needle extended and pricked her finger. Genetic signature recognized, royal line. "Valara." A mechanical voice boomed. "Access denied. Quarantine protocols in effect." "What?" Valara gasped. She tried again. "Access denied. The system is locked down," Valara said, panic rising in her voice. "It has been sealed since the war. It will not open for the current monarch. It requires a progenitor signature, a pure bloodline from before the divergence." "We came all this way for a door we cannot open?" Elias asked. Valara slammed her fist against the door. "Aurelius knew this. He knew I could not access the proof." Elias looked at the console. He felt a strange sensation in his gut, a pulling, not toward Valara, but toward the door. "The bond," Elias murmured. "You said it rewrote my biology. You said you gave me a regenerative strain." "Yes, but it is still my strain," Valara said. "Is it?" Elias asked. "Or did it mix with mine? Human biology is adaptable. Maybe it changed into something else, something older." He stepped up to the console. "Elias, do not," Valara warned. "The defense systems will vaporize you if the signature is invalid." Elias ignored her. He felt the hum of the machine and it felt familiar. It felt like the cathedral ruin where he crashed. He placed his hand on the interface. The needle pricked his skin. The silence stretched for a terrifying second. "Genetic signature detected." The voice boomed. "Analyzing. Hybrid strain confirmed. Progenitor markers identified. Welcome, traveler." The geometric patterns on the door spun wildly. The massive seal hissed, venting centuries of stale air. Slowly, majestically, The door groaned open. Valara stared at Elias, her mouth slightly open. "Progenitor markers?" she whispered. "That is impossible. The progenitors have been extinct for 1,000 years. Apparently." "I am a throwback," Elias said, rubbing his finger. He walked into the vault. Valara followed, looking at him with a mixture of awe and terror. The vault was filled with rows of crystalline data shards, but in the center, on a pedestal, sat a single physical book made of gold sheets. "The first accord," Valara said reverently. She opened the book. Her eyes scanned the engraved symbols. "Here," she said, pointing to a page, Article 7. "No external commercial entity shall hold sway over the blood. The punishment is the dissolution of the conspiring clan." "This proves Aurelius is committing treason," Elias said. "It proves more than that," Valara said, looking up at him. "It proves he has forfeited his life." She closed the book and tucked it under her arm. "We have it. Let us get out of here." As they turned to leave, the station's intercom crackled to life. "Alert. Vault breach detected. Royal override signal broadcasting." Elias froze. "Broadcasting?" Valara checked her wrist comp. Her face went pale. "The system," she said. "Opening the vault triggered a galaxy-wide notification. It is a security feature I forgot about." "Who got the notification?" Elias asked. "Everyone," Valara said. "Every clan leader, the Senate, and Aurelius." They sprinted back to the airlock. The station was waking up around them. Lights flickered on, red and angry. Security drones dropped from the ceiling, their scanners sweeping the hallways. "Dax!" Elias shouted into his comms. "We are coming in hot. Prepare for disconnect." "I am a little busy right now," Dax yelled back. "We have company." Elias and Valara burst through the airlock into the rust bucket. Dax was frantically punching controls. "Look!" Dax pointed out the viewport. Space around the archive was no longer empty. 3 sleek black interceptors were holding position, their weapons locked on Dax's ship. They bore the insignia of the Interstellar Senate. "This is Senate Peacekeeper Vessel Aegis," a voice commanded over the radio. "You are in violation of Galactic Statute 99. Surrender the human-designated Elias Thorne immediately." "The Senate," Elias said. "They are here already?" "They were waiting," Valara realized. "Aurelius knew we would come here. He used us to open the door he could not crack." A giant holographic projection appeared in space, projected from the lead Senate ship. It showed a news feed. Breaking news. The headline screamed, "Rogue human pilot seizes control of ancient vampire weapon system." "Senate issues Class 1 warrant. They are spinning it," Elias said, watching his own face rotate on the screen. "They are saying I broke in to steal weapons. Not that I unlocked the history. Queen Valara," the Senate commander continued, "you are harboring a fugitive who possesses an illegal biological key. Surrender him, and you will be granted diplomatic immunity. Refuse, and you will be classified as a hostile combatant." Valara looked at the screen, then at Elias. "This is the choice," she said quietly. "If I give you up, I look weak, but I keep my throne. If I keep you, I declare war on the Senate." Elias looked at the ships. The weapons were charging. "Valara," Elias said, "you cannot fight the Senate." "I am not fighting the Senate," Valara said, her eyes hardening. "I am fighting for my partner." She hit the comms button. "This is Queen Valara. The human is under my protection. Any attempt to board this vessel will be met with lethal force." "Acknowledged," the commander said. Firing solution locked. Dax grabbed the yoke. "Hold on to your stomachs." Before the Senate ships could fire, a massive shadow fell over them. A dreadnought dropped out of warp speed directly between the rust bucket and the Senate fleet. It was enormous, a floating fortress of black metal and red lights. It bore the crest of the Royal Guard. "It is the Chancellor's flagship," Valara said, hope flaring in her chest. "Aurelius's personal dreadnought, the Sovereign. Stand down, Senate vessels." Aurelius's voice boomed over the open channel. "This is an internal matter of the Blood Empire. You have no jurisdiction here." The Senate ships hesitated. They were outgunned 10-1. "We are taking the Queen and the subject into custody for their own safety." Aurelius continued. "Valara, dock your vessel in my hangar bay. We will get you out of here." "He saved us," Elias said, frowning. "Why would he save us if he wants us dead?" "Because he needs the book," Valara said. "And he needs you. You are the only one who can open the other vaults now." She looked at the massive dreadnought. It was a mouth waiting to swallow them. "It is a trap," Valara said. "I know," Elias replied, "but do we have a choice?" Dax looked at the radar. "Senate ships behind us, dreadnought in front of us. My shields are at 12%. We have no choice." "Take us in," Valara commanded. The rust bucket glided into the gaping hangar bay of the Sovereign. As soon as they touched down, heavy blast doors slammed shut behind them, cutting off the stars. A regiment of soldiers in black armor surrounded the ship. They were not pointing their weapons at the ship, but they were standing in a formation that suggested a prison, not a rescue. Valara stood up and smoothed her jumpsuit. She grabbed the book of the First Accord. "Ready to go into the lion's den?" she asked. Elias checked the charge on his kinetic pistol, though he knew it would be useless against an army. "Clause 11, Elias said, forcing a grin. "When walked into a trap, make sure you ruin the furniture." They lowered the ramp and walked out together, hand in hand, into the belly of the beast. The moment the blast doors of the Sovereign sealed behind the rust bucket, the illusion of rescue evaporated. The hangar bay was not prepared for a diplomatic reception. It was prepared for a containment breach. 3 squads of Aurelius's elite shock troops, the Obsidian Guard, stood in a phalanx formation, their heavy pulse rifles leveled at the ship's ramp. Dax swore loudly in his native tongue, a sound like grinding gears. I knew it. I knew the quadruple pay was too good to be true. Valara stood by the airlock, her hand gripping the golden book of the First Accord so tightly her knuckles were white. "Do not fire," she commanded Elias and Dax. "If we fire, we justify their aggression. We walk out. We force them to act." They descended the ramp. The air in the hangar was sterile and cold, smelling of gun oil and pressurized atmosphere. Chancellor Aurelius stood behind the wall of soldiers. He was not smiling. He looked regretful, the face of a man burdened by terrible necessity. "Secure the Queen," Aurelius ordered, his voice amplified by the ship's speakers. "Escort her to the executive suite. She is fatigued and confused." "And the human?" a captain asked. Aurelius looked at Elias. There was no hatred in his eyes, only a clinical detachment. "The human is a biological hazard. Take him to the zero-gravity vivarium. Purge the contagion." Elias moved to step in front of Valara, but she was faster. She shoved the golden book into his chest. "Run!" she screamed. It was the signal. Dax detonated the rust bucket's ventral thrusters. The ship did not take off, but the sudden blast of superheated ion wash swept across the hangar floor, blinding the guards and creating a chaotic storm of steam and heat. In the confusion, they were separated. Valara was tackled by 3 guards. She fought with the ferocity of a cornered tigress, breaking the arm of the first attacker. But a neural stun baton slammed into her lower back. Her legs gave out, and darkness claimed her. Elias was knocked backward by the concussion of the blast. He scrambled to his feet, clutching the book. He saw Valara fall. He roared, a sound that tore from his throat with unnatural power, and lunged toward her. A gravity net fell over him. It was a heavy, weighted mesh that pinned him to the deck plating, crushing the air from his lungs. Processing subject for the vivarium, a metallic voice intoned. Elias watched helplessly as they dragged Valara away. His vision blurred, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He felt her fear spike through the bond, sharp and cold, before distance and the stun effects dulled the connection to a thrumming ache. The vivarium was a nightmare of bioengineering. It was a massive, spherical chamber located in the center of the dreadnought, designed to simulate a jungle environment in zero gravity. Massive trees with root systems that floated in the air like tentacles filled the space, surrounded by drifting globules of water and thick, humid mist. Elias drifted in the center of the dark forest, his body rotating slowly. They had stripped him of his jacket and weapons, leaving him in the torn flight suit. The golden book was gone, confiscated by the guards before they threw him in. He was not alone. The vivarium was used for training the Obsidian Guard's hunter-killers, and the hunt had begun. Elias grabbed a passing branch to stabilize himself. He closed his eyes. The visual chaos of floating leaves and water droplets was distracting. He needed to rely on the new senses Valara had given him. He inhaled. The air smelled of synthetic chlorophyll and sweat. He focused on the sound. Beneath the hum of the ventilation fans, he heard the soft hiss of pressurized jets. 3 targets. Moving in a triangular formation, above, below, and behind. They were using stealth suits, optically camouflaged against the foliage. To a normal human, they would have been invisible. To Elias, whose eyes now adjusted to the infrared spectrum of body heat, they were burning ghosts against the cold background of the plants. Elias pushed off the branch. He did not move like a soldier. He moved like a pilot. He understood vectors and momentum. He launched himself through a gap in the roots, twisting his body to avoid a silent razor disc that sliced through the air where his neck had been a second before. He grabbed a thick vine and swung around a trunk, using the centrifugal force to launch himself upward, directly at the hunter above him. The hunter, expecting prey that cowered, was slow to react. Elias slammed into him. In zero gravity, mass was the only weapon that mattered. Elias drove his shoulder into the hunter's solar plexus. The air rushed out of the man's lungs. Elias did not strike to kill. He grabbed the hunter's propulsion pack and ripped the fuel line free. High-pressure nitrogen hissed out, sending the hunter spinning uncontrollably into the dense canopy, crashing through branches. One down, the other 2 opened fire. Silent, kinetic darts shredded the bark around Elias's head. He kicked off the trunk, diving into a large, floating sphere of water. The water slowed the velocity of the darts. Elias swam through the globule, emerging on the other side just as the second hunter closed in with a vibro knife. Elias caught the man's wrist. The strength in his hands was terrifying. He squeezed. The armor crunched, and the hunter dropped the knife with a cry of pain. Elias spun the man around, using him as a human shield against the third attacker. "Stop!" Elias shouted. "I do not want to kill you." The third hunter hesitated. "You are fighting for a traitor," Elias yelled, his voice echoing in the sphere. "Aurelius is selling you out to the mining corporations." The hunter fired. The dart hit the man Elias was holding in the shoulder armor, knocking them both backward. Elias shoved the injured man toward his partner and grabbed a floating vine. He pulled hard, collapsing a heavy canopy of bioluminescent moss onto both of them. It was not a lethal trap, but the sticky, heavy fibers entangled them, leaving them drifting and cursing in the dark. Elias propelled himself toward the airlock at the top of the sphere. He placed his hand on the panel. It was bio-locked. He closed his eyes and focused on the bond. He reached out with his mind, pushing past the pain and the distance, searching for the resonance of the queen. Valara, he thought. I need a door open. Valara awoke in a cell that was more like a luxury office, furnished with velvet chairs and a desk of rare wood. But the door was shielded by a force field that hummed with lethal energy. She sat up, rubbing the back of her neck. The stun baton had left a migraine that throbbed behind her eyes. She stood and walked to the desk. It was unlocked. Aurelius was arrogant. He assumed that without her guards, she was just a figurehead. She began to rifle through the physical files on the desk. They were shipping manifests. She picked one up. It detailed a transfer of cargo from the Royal Gene Vault to a freighter registered in the Outer Rim. The cargo was listed as Class A biological samples. Class A meant royal blood. Valara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Aurelius was not just selling technology, he was selling the blood itself. He was selling the immortality of her people to the highest bidder in the galaxy. She found another document. It was a draft of a new constitution. It proposed the dissolution of the monarchy and the establishment of a high regency, a position held for life, with the authority to override clan autonomy. He promised the rival clans shared control, Valara whispered to the empty room. But this gives him absolute power. He tricked them. She looked at the door. She had to get out. She felt a sudden, sharp tug in her chest. It was Elias. He was alive. He was fighting. And he was reaching for her. The sensation was overwhelming. It was not just a mental message. It was a transfer of energy. She could feel his adrenaline, his desperate need for an exit. She walked to the force field. She did not have the codes, but she had the source. She bit her own thumb, drawing a bead of violet blood. She pressed it against the energy field. The field reacted violently to the royal signature. It sparked, hissed, and then destabilized. The safety protocols of the ship were designed to protect the monarch, not imprison her. The field recognized her biology and shut down to prevent harming her. Valara stepped through the barrier. She moved through the corridors of the dreadnought like a phantom. She avoided patrols, slipping into shadows, her senses extending outward to track the heartbeats of the crew. She found a maintenance lift and took it down to the sub-levels. She was following the pull. She rounded a corner and saw 2 guards standing outside the vivarium airlock. Valara did not slow down. She sprinted, leaping into the air and delivering a gravity-assisted kick to the first guard's helmet. He crumpled. The second guard raised his rifle, but Valara was already inside his guard. She struck his throat with the edge of her hand, a precise, non-lethal blow that collapsed his windpipe just enough to incapacitate him. She slammed her hand onto the airlock control. "Cycle," she commanded. The door hissed open. Elias tumbled out, wet, covered in moss, and breathing hard. He looked up and saw her. For a moment, they just stared at each other. The relief was a physical impact. The bond flared, erasing the pain, the fear, and the cold. "You look terrible," Valara said, offering him a hand. "You should see the other guys," Elias panted, taking her hand. "They are currently wrapped in a salad." He pulled himself up. He did not let go of her hand. He pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her. It was not a calculated move. It was instinct. Valara stiffened for a second, then melted. She buried her face in his shoulder, gripping the back of his wet flight suit. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "Not that easy," Elias said against her hair. They stood there in the corridor of the enemy ship, 2 fugitives holding on to each other as if they were the only solid things in the universe. The desire that flared between them was sharp and undeniable. fueled by the adrenaline of survival. "We need to move," Elias said, pulling back reluctantly. "Where is the book?" "Aurelius has it," Valara said. "He took it to the bridge. He plans to destroy it before he announces his new government." "Then we go to the bridge," Elias said. They moved through the ship's ventilation ducts, bypassing the heavy security on the main decks. The cramped space forced them close. They stopped in a junction to catch their breath. Valara looked at Elias. The bioluminescence of the ship's internal lights cast strange shadows on his face. "Why did you come back for me?" she asked quietly. "You could have escaped through the emergency pods in the vivarium." Elias wiped water from his eyes. "I told you. Clause 1 of the survival contract. We are partners." Valara looked down. "I saw the files. Elias, Aurelius is selling the blood. He is shipping it off-world." Elias cursed softly. "So the conspiracy is not just political. It is trafficking. He is going to announce his regency in 1 hour." Valara said, "He has summoned the clan leaders via hologram. He will tell them I died in the crash or that I was executed for treason. Then he will destroy the Accord and seal his power. We have to stop the broadcast," Elias said. "No," Valara said, her eyes narrowing. "We hijack it." She pulled a datapad from her belt, stolen from the guard she knocked out. "We cannot just tell them he is a traitor. They will not believe us. We have to show them. We need to broadcast the contents of the Accord and the shipping manifest to every screen in the sector simultaneously." "Can you do that?" "I can," Valara said, "if you can buy me 5 minutes at the main communication console." 5 minutes against a dreadnought crew, Elias said. "Easy. I will just juggle for them." Valara smiled. "A quick, fleeting thing. You know," she said, "if we survive this, I might actually let you say I told you so. I am looking forward to it." They reached the grate overlooking the bridge. It was a massive command center, bustling with officers. Aurelius stood on the central dais, the golden book resting on a podium before him. He was rehearsing a speech. Elias kicked the grate out. They dropped. The element of surprise was total. Elias landed on a console, shattering it. Valara landed in the center of the room, a shockwave of kinetic energy radiating from her impact. "Secure the bridge!" Valara shouted. Elias vaulted over a railing, tackling the security chief before he could draw his weapon. He grabbed a stun rifle from a rack and fired a suppression spread, forcing the bridge crew to duck for cover. Valara sprinted to the communication station. She shoved the officer aside and began typing furiously. Aurelius stood on the dais, unmoving. He looked at them with mild annoyance. "You are persistent," he said. Valara did not look up. She was bypassing the encryption firewalls. Elias kept the guards pinned down. He jumped behind a command chair, firing bursts of stun energy. "Give it up!" "Aurelius!" Elias shouted. "We know about the mining deal. We know about the High Regency." Aurelius sighed. He tapped the golden book. "This empire is stagnant, pilot. We have been rotting in our traditions for centuries. I am bringing us into the modern galaxy. Commerce, integration, progress." "Progress?" Valara spat, her fingers flying across the keys. "You call selling your people for profit progress?" She hit the final key. "Upload complete," she said. The main view screen flickered. The image of the spinning station was replaced by a live feed of Valara and Elias on the bridge. "Attention all clans!" Elias shouted, stepping into the frame. He raised his hands dramatically. Valara looked at him. "What are you doing?" "Improvising," Elias whispered. "Citizens of the Blood Empire," Elias bellowed, his voice projecting like a stage actor. He pointed a finger at Aurelius. "Behold the man who would sell your heritage for a seat at a corporate table." We bring you the truth from the first accord. It was absurd. It was theatrical. And it bought Valara the seconds she needed to link the manifest files to the broadcast stream. Sending the data now, Valara said. Valara. The screens throughout the ship and across the entire sector flashed with documents. The shipping manifests. The High Regent Constitution. The article from the First Accord forbidding commercial interference. It is done, Valara said, breathing hard. The whole galaxy can see it. She looked at Aurelius, expecting fear, expecting defeat. Aurelius was smiling. He clapped his hands slowly. Bravo, he said, a magnificent performance, truly. He walked over to his own console and pressed a single button. The documents on the screen shifted. The shipping manifest remained, but the name on the authorization line changed. It did not say Aurelius. It said Queen Valara. The Constitution draft changed. The signature at the bottom was hers. And then, a new video file played. It was grainy footage of the Iron Mule crashing, but the audio was doctored. Valara's voice. Crash the human pilot. I need a distraction to covertly move the shipment. Elias froze. He looked at the screen. What is this? Elias asked. This, Aurelius said, smoothing his robes, is what is known as a contingency plan. Did you really think I would leave digital footprints? I have been doctoring these records for months. Every shipment, every bribe, every treasonous act. It is all signed by you, my queen. The comms channel lit up with the voices of the clan leaders. They were screaming, "Traitor! She sold us out! Death to the queen!" Valara stared at the screen, horror washing over her. You framed me, she whispered. You let me broadcast my own death warrant. Aurelius picked up the golden book. The Senate will be horrified, he said smoothly. They will demand your abdication, and to restore order. The clans will beg me to step in. He looked at the guards, who were now standing up, realizing the tide had turned. Kill them, Aurelius commanded. Elias grabbed Valara. She was frozen, paralyzed by the magnitude of the betrayal. Valara, Elias shouted. We have to go. He dragged her toward the emergency airlock on the side of the bridge. He shot the control panel, shorting the door open. They threw themselves into the escape pod just as the plasma bolts began to hammer the hull. Elias punched the launch button. The pod blasted away from the Sovereign, spinning into the black void. Inside. Valara sat on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. He won, she said, her voice hollow. He turned the truth into a weapon. Elias looked out the window at the massive dreadnought getting smaller. He felt the anger in his gut, burning hotter than the engines. Not yet, Elias said. He won the round. He has not won the fight. He looked at Valara. Clause 12, he said softly. Valara looked up, tears of rage in her teal eyes. What is Clause 12? She asked. When the truth does not work, Elias said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. We stop playing by the rules. We go to the source. Where? The asteroid temple, Elias said. The place where the progenitors started this whole mess. If he wants to rewrite history, we are going to go get the original copy. The pod drifted into the darkness, carrying a fallen queen and a human pilot who was just getting started. The escape pod, a claustrophobic cylinder of scratched plasteel and blinking emergency lights, had finally died. It drifted in the magnetic shadow of a derelict mining station on the edge of the carrion belt, its power cells drained to the last %. Inside, the air was stale, tasting of recycled carbon dioxide and the metallic tang of fear. Valara huddled near the small viewport, watching a holographic feed she had managed to splice from a passing satellite. Her face, usually a mask of regal composure, was illuminated by the flickering blue light of chaos. "It is burning," she whispered. "Everything is burning." Elias Thorne floated in the zero gravity of the cabin, anchoring himself by a handhold. He looked over her shoulder. The feed showed the capital city of the necropolis. But it was not the orderly, silent city he remembered. Smoke columns rose like black fingers against the purple sky. Crowds of thousands, humans, aliens, and lower caste vampires flooded the obsidian plazas. They were not chanting for the queen. They were tearing down her banners. Down with the blood tyranny. A digital banner screamed in the crowd. "No more secret laws." "They hate me," Valara said, her voice hollow. "Aurelius did his work well. He did not just frame me for treason. He painted me as the architect of their suffering." Elias watched a clip of a human protester throwing a Molotov cocktail at a statue of Valara's father. The statue's face melted into slag. "They do not hate you," Elias said, pushing off the wall to float beside her. "They hate the silence. They hate the fact that for 500 years, decisions about their lives were made in a dark room they could not enter." Valara turned to him. Her teal eyes were red-rimmed. "And now I am the symbol of that darkness," she said. The console let out a sharp, piercing chime. It was not a distress signal. It was an incoming transmission. "Encrypted channel," Valara said, her hands flying over the controls. "It is bypassing our localized jammer." "Accept it," Elias said. The holographic emitter sputtered, and a face appeared. It was not Aurelius. It was a faceless avatar, a smooth, silver mask used by corporate headhunters and high-end assassins. "Mr. Thorne," the synthesized voice purred. "We are relieved to see you are still functional." "Who is this?" Elias demanded. "We represent a consortium of concerned investors," the voice said. "The Interstellar Mining Guild, to be precise. We have a proposition." "I am listening," Elias said, though he signaled Valara to start tracing the signal. "The narrative has shifted." "Mr. Thorne," the voice continued, "the galaxy views you as a victim, a poor, primitive human seduced and experimented on by a monster. We can offer you extraction, immunity, and a settlement of 50 million credits deposited into an account on Terra Prime." Elias laughed, a dry, humorless sound. 50 million. "That is a lot of salvage runs. All you have to do is surrender," the voice said. "Publicly denounce Queen Valara. Hand over your blood signature so we can correct the anomaly and walk away." Valara looked at Elias. She did not speak. She did not plead. She simply waited, her body tense, expecting the betrayal that her history had taught her was inevitable. Elias looked at the silver mask. He thought about the money. He thought about a quiet life on a beach planet where the sun did not burn your skin. Then he looked at Valara. He felt the bond humming between them, a low, steady resonance of shared fear and defiance. He looked back at the screen. "You want my signature so you can unlock the gene vaults," Elias said. "You want to strip mine this sector and turn the clans into indentured servants. Aurelius is just the middleman. You are the buyers. Queen Valara is finished." "Mr. Thorne," the voice said, "harder now. Do not go down with the wreckage." Elias leaned into the pickup. "Tell Aurelius I am not a victim," Elias said, "and tell him his price is too low. My silence costs more than your entire guild is worth." He smashed his fist into the console, severing the connection. The hologram vanished. Valara stared at him. 50 million credits, she whispered. "You could have bought your own moon." "I do not want a moon," Elias said, rubbing his bruised knuckles. "I want to win." He looked at the navigation computer. The trace had failed, but it did not matter. They had a destination. Set a course for the asteroid field, Elias said. We are going to the Temple of Ash. The journey to the massacre site was a gauntlet of stealth and mechanical improvisation. They had abandoned the dead escape pod and hot-wired a rusted ore hopper from the derelict station. The ship, which Elias christened the Rock Rat, shook violently as it navigated the dense debris field of the outer rim. The Temple of Ash was not a building. It was a hollowed-out asteroid the size of a city, tethered in the center of a magnetic storm that made scanners useless. It loomed out of the dust, a jagged, dark rock studded with ancient spires that looked like thorns. This is where it began, Valara said quietly as they approached the landing bay. The progenitors built this sanctuary 3,000 years ago to sign the first accord. It is where my family died. I have not been back since I was a child. Elias landed the hopper on a landing pad overgrown with crystalline moss. The gravity here was artificial and heavy, pressing down on them like a physical weight. They suited up. Elias checked his kinetic pistol. Valara carried only a plasma torch and the weight of her ancestors. They entered the main airlock. The air inside was freezing, preserving the silence of centuries. As they walked down the long, vaulted corridor toward the inner sanctum, the air began to shimmer. Psychic dampeners, Valara warned, gripping Elias's arm. The progenitors used biofeedback systems to guard their secrets. They do not use lasers. They use memory. Elias felt it instantly. A headache spiked behind his eyes. Then, the world twisted. The corridor vanished. Suddenly, Elias was not in an alien temple. He was back in the cockpit of the Iron Mule. But it was not crashing. He was sitting there, staring at a contract. A man in a corporate suit was standing over him. "Sign it, monkey," the man sneered. "You are nothing. Just a pair of hands we rented. You do not matter." Elias felt the old, familiar shame. The feeling of being small, of being interchangeable. "You are just a passenger in your own life," the man said, his voice warping into Aurelius's smooth baritone. "You are a pet to a queen, a biological error." Elias gritted his teeth. He knew this was an illusion, but the emotion was real. It was his deepest insecurity amplified to a scream. "Get out!" Elias roared, swinging his fist at the phantom. His hand passed through smoke. "Elias!" Valara's voice cut through the dark. Elias blinked. The cockpit dissolved. He was back in the corridor on his knees. Valara was kneeling beside him, shaking him, but she was crying. He looked at her. Her eyes were wide, staring at something behind him that wasn't there. "They are screaming," Valara whispered. "Can you not hear them? My mother. She is begging him to stop." She curled into a ball, covering her ears. "I caused it," she sobbed. "I survived because I was small and because I was a coward. I should have died with them. I am a monster ruling a kingdom of ghosts." Elias grabbed her shoulders. The bond flared. He could feel her guilt. It was a black, crushing ocean. It threatened to drown both of them. "Valara!" Elias shouted. "Look at me!" She shook her head. Her eyes squeezed shut. "Valara, listen to me. You were a child. You did not survive because you were a coward. You survived so you could fix it." He pulled her against him. He projected every ounce of stubborn, grit-toothed resolve he had down the bond. He forced her to feel his belief in her. "You are not a monster," Elias said, his voice rough. "You are the woman who saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. That is not a monster. That is a queen." Valara gasped, her breath hitching. The psychic pressure receded, pushed back by the sudden clarity of their connection. She opened her eyes. The ghosts faded. She looked at Elias, her face wet with tears. "You pulled me out," she whispered. "We pulled each other out," Elias said, helping her stand. They moved forward, hand in hand, their bond now acting as a shield against the psychic static. They reached the inner sanctum. It was a circular room dominated by a massive bioluminescent mural that covered the entire domed ceiling. It depicted the history of the progenitors. Valara walked to the center of the room. A single podium stood there, holding a data spike. "This is it," she said. "The original copy of the Accord." But Elias was looking at the mural. "Valara, look," he said, pointing up. The mural showed a progenitor, tall, pale, alien, and kneeling before him was a figure, a smaller, frailer figure, a human. The progenitor was not killing the human. He was biting him. And from the wound, light was flowing into the human, not out. Golden lines connected them, merging their nervous systems. The text beneath the image was written in the high tongue. But as Elias looked at it, the knowledge in his blood translated it. The Bridge Protocol. Elias read aloud, "When the silence between species threatens war, the blood shall bind them. Two become one, not master and slave, but lock and key." Valara stared at the image. It was not an accident, she whispered. The bite, it was not just an emergency medical procedure. It was designed. She looked at Elias, realization dawning on her face. Centuries ago, the progenitors knew that humans and vampires would clash, she said. They created the royal strain not just to rule the clans, but to interface with humanity. The bond we share. It is the ultimate diplomatic tool. It is a peace treaty written in biology. Elias looked at his hands. The veins glowed faintly. "So I am not a glitch," he said. "I am the plan." A slow clap echoed from the entrance of the sanctum. Elias and Valara spun around. Chancellor Aurelius stood in the archway. He was flanked by 6 members of the Obsidian Guard, their weapons raised. "Poetic," Aurelius said, walking into the room. "Truly, the history lesson is quite moving. It is a shame no one else will ever see it." "How did you find us?" Valara demanded, stepping in front of Elias. Aurelius tapped his temple. "The bond, my dear. You two are broadcasting your location like a beacon. The more you use it, the easier it is to track." He stopped 10 paces away. He looked at the mural, then at Elias. The Bridge Protocol, Aurelius mused, a fascinating concept. Integration, shared power. Disgusting, really. He signaled his guards. They fanned out, surrounding the pair. "I have a proposal," Aurelius said, "a final one." He looked at Valara. "The Senate is getting nervous. The protests are getting out of hand. They want stability. They want you gone, Valara, but they do not want a martyr. If I kill you here, the galaxy burns." "So what do you want?" Elias asked, his hand drifting toward his pistol. Aurelius ignored him. He kept his eyes on the Queen. "Abdicate," Aurelius said. "Sign a public confession admitting to madness and incompetence. Name me High Regent. Go into exile. And if I refuse?" Valara asked. "Then I kill the human," Aurelius said pleasantly. He pointed a finger at Elias. "I will execute him right here. Slowly. I will peel the interesting biology out of him layer by layer, and I will make you watch." Valara went still. The threat hit her with the force of a physical blow. She knew Aurelius. She knew he was not bluffing. "Spare him," Valara said, her voice trembling. "If you sign, he walks," Aurelius promised. "I will give him a ship and enough credits to disappear. He lives." Valara looked at Elias. She looked at the man who had crashed into her life and turned her cold, orderly world upside down. She saw the fear in his eyes, but she also saw the fire. She loved him. The realization was not a soft, romantic thing. It was a hard, jagged truth. She loved him enough to destroy herself to keep him breathing. "I accept," Valara said, No, Elias shouted. Valara stepped forward. Give me the datapad. I will sign. Valara, stop! Elias yelled. He tried to move, but two guards leveled their rifles at his chest. Valara looked back at him. Her eyes were full of tears. It is the only way. Elias, I cannot let you die. You are the only good thing that has happened to me in 100 years. She reached for the datapad Aurelius held out. Elias felt her resignation through the bond. It was a surrender, a shutting down. And suddenly, he was furious. Do not do it, Elias roared. The sheer volume of his voice made Aurelius flinch. Valara froze, her hand inches from the pad. This is not love! Valara! Elias shouted, stepping into the barrel of the gun pointed at him. This is fear! If you sign that paper, you are not saving me. You are erasing us. He looked at Aurelius, his eyes burning with a strange golden intensity. He wants you to sign because he is scared, Elias said. He knows that if we walk out of here together, with the truth of the bridge protocol, his entire philosophy of racial purity falls apart. He does not just want your crown. He wants to break the symbol of what we are. Elias turned back to Valara. We do not trade freedom for survival, he said, fierce and low. That is a bad deal. I do not sign bad deals. Valara looked at him. She saw the refusal in his eyes. He would rather die standing next to her than live somewhere else knowing she was broken. She pulled her hand back. She looked at Aurelius. The tears dried up instantly, replaced by the cold, dangerous calm of the queen. He is right, Valara said. She ignited the plasma torch she had been holding at her belt. We decline the offer. Aurelius sneered. Then die! Kill them, he shouted. The guards opened fire, but Elias and Valara moved as one. Elias grabbed the podium, ripping the heavy stone column from the floor with his enhanced strength and hurling it at the three guards on the left. It smashed into them with bone-shattering force. Valara did not run, not. She slammed her hand onto the data spike in the center of the room. System override, she commanded. Activate sanctuary defenses. The room screamed. The bioorganic walls came alive. The mural overhead split open. Tendrils of hard light energy whipped down like lightning. These were the defenses of the progenitors, designed to protect the Accord from non-believers. The tendrils ignored Elias and Valara, recognizing their genetic signature as authorized. They lashed out at the Obsidian Guard. Aurelius screamed as a lash of energy struck his shoulder, burning through his armor. Retreat! Aurelius howled. Fall back! Chaos erupted. The temple was waking up, and it was angry. The floor began to shift, geometric blocks rising to create cover for the queen and her consort. We have the data, Valara shouted, grabbing the crystal spike. Go! They sprinted through the shifting maze of the room. Plasma bolts sizzled past their ears. Elias fired blindly behind him, covering their escape. They reached the corridor. The psychic dampeners were going haywire, projecting images of war and fire. But they ran through the illusions, their hands locked together. They burst out of the airlock and into the thin atmosphere of the landing bay. To the hopper, Elias yelled. They scrambled into the rock rat. Elias slammed the thrusters to maximum. The ship lurched into the sky just as the temple's outer defenses began to fire massive energy beams at Aurelius's shuttle. They punched through the debris field, leaving the chaos behind them. Once they were clear, drifting in the silent black of deep space. Elias slumped back in the pilot's seat. He was bleeding from a graze on his arm, and he was exhausted. Valara sat beside him, clutching the data spike. We did it, she breathed. We have the proof, the Accord, the bridge protocol. We can end this. Elias looked at the comms panel. It was blinking again. Another transmission. Aurelius? Elias asked. Valara nodded. Put him on. The screen flickered. Aurelius appeared. He was burned, his robes torn, standing on the bridge of his dreadnought. He looked deranged, stripped of his diplomatic mask. You think you have won? Aurelius spat. You have a history book. I have the present. The camera angle widened. Behind Aurelius, kneeling on the deck, were three figures. One was Dax, the smuggler. His blue skin was bruised, his cybernetic arm torn off. The other two were members of Valara's old council who had remained loyal. I anticipated you might escape the temple, Aurelius said, placing a hand on Dax's shoulder. So I collected some insurance. Dax looked up at the camera. He spat blood. Don't listen to him, Elias, flush the airlock. Aurelius struck Dax across the face. Here is the new deal. Aurelius hissed. Bring me the data spike. Bring me the queen. Come to the Capitol Plaza at dawn tomorrow. Or I execute them. One every hour, starting with the alien. He leaned into the camera. You wanted to be a hero, human. Let us see how many friends you are willing to let die for your principles. The screen went black. Silence filled the cockpit of the rock rat. Elias stared at the blank screen. His hands gripped the yoke so hard the plastic cracked. Valara stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the distant stars. She placed a hand on the glass. He wants a final confrontation, she said softly. Elias stood up and walked to her. He placed his hand over hers on the glass. He thinks he has us cornered, Elias said. He thinks we will come to surrender. Valara turned to him. Her eyes were not afraid anymore. They were furious. They were the eyes of a ruler who was done hiding in ventilation shafts. We are going to the capital, Valara said, but not to surrender. No, Elias agreed. We are going to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a salvage pilot's friends. He looked at the data spike. Part 6 is going to be loud, Elias said. Valara nodded. Let us go home, partner, and let us take back my throne. The capital city of the necropolis was a canyon of black glass and neon fire, usually silent in its oppression. But today it roared. The Grand Plaza, a sprawling expanse of obsidian pavement capable of holding 200,000 souls, was packed to capacity. The air vibrated with the chanting of the lower castes, the hum of hover drones, and the static tension of a storm about to break. Above the crowd, floating on gravity discs, were the viewing boxes of the 12 high clans, their banners snapping in the artificial wind. At the apex of the plaza stood the Spire of Law, a towering needle of white stone where Chancellor Aurelius waited. He looked every inch the savior he claimed to be. His robes were pristine white, embroidered with gold thread that caught the harsh lights of the media drones. Behind him, kneeling on the hard stone, were his hostages. Dax, the Tellarite smuggler, looking battered but defiant, and two of Valara's loyal counselors. Their heads bowed. Aurelius raised his hands. The crowd fell into a ragged, uneasy silence. Citizens of the Blood Empire. Aurelius's voice boomed, amplified by the city's acoustic grid. We stand at the precipice of a new era. For too long, we have been held back by the superstition of the royal line. Today, we purge the rot. He pointed to the sky. Descending through the clouds was not a warship, but a battered, rusted ore hopper, the rock rat. It did not fly with grace. It shuddered and groaned, its engine spitting black smoke. It did not land in the hangar. It slammed down right in the center of the plaza, cracking the pristine obsidian tiles. The ramp dropped with a heavy clang. Two figures emerged. Queen Valara did not wear a crown. She wore a flight suit that was torn at the shoulder and stained with grease. She carried no scepter, only a data spike gripped in her hand. Beside her walked Elias Thorne. He looked exactly what he was, a tired human salvage pilot who had been dragged through hell and refused to burn. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. They expected a monster. They expected a tyrant in armor. They saw a woman and a man who looked like they had just crawled out of a grave. "So," Aurelius sneered, his voice dripping with theatrical pity. "The traitor queen returns to beg for mercy." Valara walked forward. The crowd parted for her, not out of respect, but out of fear of the armed guards lining the path. She stopped 20 yards from the dais. "I am not here to beg." "Aurelius," Valara said. Her voice was not amplified, but in the silence of the plaza, it carried with the clear cutting edge of a diamond. "I am here to testify." "Testify?" Aurelius laughed. "You are here to surrender. You are here to admit that you weaponized this human to destroy our traditions." He gestured to Elias. "Look at him," Aurelius shouted to the clans. "A human, walking in the sacred plaza. He carries the royal strain in his veins. He is a biological abomination created by Valara to bypass the clan laws and seize absolute power." Elias stepped forward. He felt the weight of 1,000,000 eyes on him. He felt the hum of the city's biotech beneath his feet, a rhythmic thrumming that synced with his own heartbeat. "I am not a weapon," Elias said. His voice was rough, unpolished. "I am a witness." Aurelius signaled the obsidian guard. 6 soldiers stepped forward, leveling their rifles at Dax's head. "Enough," Aurelius commanded. "Surrender the data spike. Valara, confess to your crimes, or I paint this plaza with the blood of your friends." Valara looked at Dax. The smuggler managed a swollen, lopsided grin. "Do not do it, your majesty." Dax wheezed. "I have had a good run. Quadruple pay was worth it." Valara looked back at Aurelius. She raised the data spike. "You want the truth?" Valara asked. "Here it is." She did not hand the spike to him. She jammed it into a port on a public news terminal standing near the crowd barrier. The screens surrounding the plaza, huge building-sized monitors usually reserved for propaganda, glitched. Static washed over them, followed by a stream of documents, blueprints, and video logs. "This is the First Blood Accord," Valara shouted, pointing at the screens. "The original copy, retrieved from the Temple of Ash." Aurelius scoffed. "Ancient history. It changes nothing." "Read Article 7, Valara challenged, turning to the floating boxes of the clan leaders. "It forbids the commercialization of the blood. It forbids the sale of our genetic heritage to off-world corporations." The screens shifted to show the mining contracts, the real ones, the ones signed by Aurelius. A murmur went through the high clans. "What is this?" Lord Vane, the leader of the Iron Clan and Valara's uncle, shouted from his box. He leaned over the railing, his face pale. "These contracts, they transfer ownership of the gene vaults to the Interstellar Mining Consortium." Aurelius stiffened. "It is a fabrication," Aurelius yelled. "A forgery created by the human, is it?" Valara countered. "Look at the payment schedules. Uncle, Aurelius is not making you High Regent. He is liquidating your assets. He has sold the rights to your clan's bloodline for 3 trillion credits. Once he is in power, the consortium takes over. You will not be lords. You will be livestock." The realization hit the crowd like a physical wave. The vampires in the audience, proud and ancient, looked at the screens with horror. They were not being liberated, they were being sold. Aurelius saw the mood shift. He saw the doubt in the eyes of his own soldiers. He realized the narrative was slipping away. "Lies!" Aurelius screamed. He pointed a shaking finger at Elias. "This human has corrupted the data. He is a virus. He is the threat. Kill him. Kill the abomination." The Obsidian Guard raised their rifles, but they did not fire. From the Iron Clan's box, Lord Vane leaped down. He landed on the plaza floor with a heavy impact, his personal honor guard flanking him. "Hold fire!" Vane roared. He looked at Aurelius. His eyes were burning with the fury of a man who realized he had been played. "You promised us autonomy." "Aurelius," Vane growled, "you did not tell us we were merchandise." Aurelius sneered, dropping the mask of the benevolent politician. "You are merchandise," Aurelius spat. "You are obsolete relics clinging to dust. The galaxy moves on credit. Vane, not honor. I am trying to save this empire from its own stagnation." He pressed a button on his wrist comp. "If you will not follow me, then I will replace you." The spire of law shuddered. Hidden compartments opened along its sides, and automated combat drones poured out like a swarm of angry wasps. They were not loyal to the clans, they were programmed by the consortium. "Kill them all," Aurelius shrieked. Chaos erupted. The drones opened fire on the crowd. Plasma bolts tore into the stone. The plaza became a kill box. Valara moved instantly. She shoved Elias behind a fallen pillar as a drone strafed their position. "We need to shut them down," Valara shouted over the noise of the screaming crowd. "The control signal is coming from the spire." "We cannot get to the spire," Elias yelled back, firing his pistol at a drone that dived toward them. "It is surrounded." "We do not need to go to the spire," Elias said, a realization striking him. "We need to go to the Foundation." He looked at the floor of the plaza. He could feel it, the massive bio-network that ran underneath the entire capital. It was the same system he had interfaced with at the temple. "The bridge protocol," Elias said. "It connects everything. If I can tap into the city's core, I can override his command codes." "You need a direct interface," Valara said. "The nearest access point is the throne room." "No," Elias said, grabbing her hand. "The bond. You are the access point. You are the queen. The city answers to you. But it needs a key to unlock the reform protocols." He looked at her. "I am the key." Valara understood. It was dangerous. It would require them to fully open the biological link between them, exposing their minds to the raw data stream of an entire civilization. "Do it," she said. Elias holstered his weapon. He took both of Valara's hands. "Cover us!" Vane shouted, seeing what they were doing. The Iron Clan soldiers formed a protective circle around the Queen and the human, their energy shields flaring as they deflected the drone fire. Elias closed his eyes. He focused on the hum in his blood. He reached out, not to the physical world, but to the digital and biological web that held the Empire together. He found Valara in the dark. She was a brilliant teal light. He merged with her, accessing Royal Mainframe. The voice in their heads spoke. "Identity confirmed. Queen Valara, identity confirmed. Hybrid interface Elias. Command?" Aurelius's drones were decimating the plaza. The Obsidian Guard was fighting the Iron Clan in a brutal civil war on the steps of the spire. "Revoke the Chancellor's clearance," Elias thought, pushing the command through Valara's authority. "Error." The system replied, "Chancellor clearance is hard-coded to the current constitution. Constitutional amendment required." Elias gritted his teeth. The system was rigid. It was built to resist change. "Then we changed the constitution." Valara's thought joined his. "Unlock the gene vaults. Decentralize the command structure. Dissolve the absolute monarchy. Warning." The system droned. "This will permanently alter the succession laws. The crown will no longer hold absolute authority." "Are you sure?" Valara did not hesitate. She had seen what absolute power did. It created loneliness. It created targets. It created men like Aurelius. "Yes," she commanded. "Give the power to the clans. Give it to the people. Executing reform protocol." A pulse of golden energy erupted from where Elias and Valara stood. It rippled out across the plaza, visible to the naked eye. It passed through the drones, through the spire, through the city itself. High above, the lights of the spire turned from angry red to a calm, pulsing blue. The drones froze in midair, their weapons powered down. System reboot, the city announced. Authority decentralized. On the dais. Aurelius looked at his wrist comp. It was dead. No, he whispered. No! He looked up. The drones were turning, and they were not looking at the crowd anymore. They were looking at him. Target identified. Enemy of the state. The city voice boomed. Aurelius turned to run, but Dax was there. The smuggler had broken his restraints during the chaos. He held a discarded blaster pistol in his one good hand. Going somewhere. Chancellor, Dax growled. Aurelius backed away, right into the arms of Lord Vane's soldiers. It is over. Aurelius, Vane said, gripping the Chancellor's shoulder with a hand of crushing strength. You are under arrest. The firing stopped. The silence that fell over the plaza was heavy, broken only by the smoke and the sobbing of the wounded. Elias and Valara broke the connection. They sagged against each other, exhausted. Valara looked around. The city was still standing. The people were alive. We did it, she whispered. Elias looked at his hands. The glow in his veins was fading to a dull, steady hum. You just abdicated your absolute power, Elias said. You are not the supreme ruler anymore. Valara looked at the crowd, who were slowly standing up, looking at her with a mixture of confusion and awe. Good, she said. I never wanted to rule the world. Elias, I just wanted to live in it. Suddenly, a scream tore through the silence. Death to the species traitor. A fanatic, a member of the Crimson Clan loyal to the old ways, burst through the line of iron guards. He held a vibroblade, his eyes wild with religious fervor. He was not aiming for Valara. He was aiming for Elias. Elias saw the blade coming. He was fast, but he was exhausted. He tried to dodge, but his legs were lead. Valara moved. She did not use a weapon. She threw herself in front of Elias, catching the fanatic's wrist, but the momentum was too great. The blade sliced down. Valara gasped. A line of red appeared on her side. No! Elias roared. He grabbed the fanatic by the throat and physically threw him 30 feet across the plaza. The attacker hit a pillar and crumpled. Elias caught Valara as she fell. Valara! He pressed his hands against her side. The wound was deep, but it was cauterized by the blade's energy. I am fine, she wheezed, clutching his arm. It missed the vitals. Elias looked at the blood on his hands. His heart was hammering so hard it hurt. You stupid, stubborn royal. Elias choked out. You took a knife for me? Clause 1, Valara whispered, a faint smile touching her pale lips. Partners protect partners. The crowd watched in stunned silence. They saw their queen bleeding. They saw the human holding her, terrified. They saw the bond, not as a political threat, but as a raw, undeniable reality. Vane walked over. He looked at Valara, then at Elias. He saw the way the human protected her. He saw the fierce, terrifying love in the human's eyes. He turned to the crowd. The queen lives, Vane shouted. And the human is of the blood. He raised his fist. The crowd hesitated. Then, slowly, a cheer began. It started low, but it grew. It was not a cheer of obedience. It was a cheer of recognition. 3 weeks later, the balcony of the royal palace overlooked a city that was rebuilding. Scaffolding covered the spire of law. The banners of the high clans flew side by side with the flags of the independent guilds. Elias leaned against the railing, holding a cup of actual, real coffee. He took a sip and sighed in contentment. best part of the deal, he said. Valara stood beside him. She wore a simple gown of blue silk, without armor. Her side was healed, leaving only a thin silver scar. The Senate has ratified the new constitution, she said, looking out at the skyline. The gene vaults are open to medical researchers. The blood tech is being distributed to the outer colonies to cure the plague of rust. And Aurelius? Elias asked. Sentenced to the orbital mines, Valara said. He wanted to sell the rocks. Now he can break them. She turned to face him. Her expression was serious, though her eyes were warm. The Council of Clans has a request, she said. Oh no, Elias said. I am not wearing a cape. They want to formalize your title, she said. They are calling you the first knight of the Accord. It comes with a seat on the High Council. Elias laughed. He set his coffee down. Tell them I pass. I am not a politician. Valara, I am a pilot. And honestly, I think I am more useful in the shadows. There are still fanatics out there who think I am a demon. If I sit on a throne, I am a target. If I am out there, I am a rumor. Valara stepped closer. She placed her hands on his chest. A rumor who sleeps in the palace? She asked softly. Elias grinned. He wrapped his arms around her waist. Well, the survival contract does specify comfortable lodging, and I am quite fond of the landlord. Valara rested her forehead against his. The bond hummed between them, warm, steady, and infinite. It was no longer a chain. It was a melody. We changed the world. Elias, she whispered. We just broke the lock, Elias corrected. Now we have to make sure the door stays open. He looked over her shoulder at the stars above. He knew it wasn't over. There were still corporations hungry for profit. There were still purists sharpening their knives. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but as he felt Valara's heartbeat against his own, synchronized and strong, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't facing it alone. Ready for the next shift? Partner? Elias asked. Valara looked up at him, her teal eyes shining with a new kind of light, the light of a woman who was finally, truly free. Always, she said. She kissed him, and for a moment, the politics, the wars, and the chaos of the galaxy faded away, leaving only the two of them, standing on the edge of a new dawn, ready to write the next chapter together.